Hey guys, what's up? Today we're going to be reviewing the Ardent Denny Brauer 7.6 heavy swim bait rod. And I picked this up because I have a lot of heavier baits that I just couldn't throw on my other rods. And I decided that I was going to pick up a dedicated swim bait rod because it's something that I want to get into and do more often. And I specifically picked this up because I picked up a Huddleston 68. That was the main bait that I wanted to fish with this rod. And to my frustration, when I was shopping, I could not find a weight limit for this rod. I couldn't find any websites that had a weight range, including the Ardent website, which kind of disappointed me. So I went on some fishing forums and I found some old comments, and I heard people saying that this could handle a Huddleston 68 weaveless. Whether or not that's true, we're going to find out once we get it out on the water. And when I got it, I did find out the rating for this rod. So it's a 7.6 heavy. It can handle between 15 and 25 pound line, and it's rated for a ½ ounce all the way up to 1.5 ounces. And right now I have 20 pound braid on here with a 15 pound mono leader. And the mono leader is mainly for shock absorption. When you're fishing these big heavy rods with a lot of leverage, your bait will speed up pretty fast, and that's a lot of weight to be tossing. And unless you have a lot of confidence throwing big heavy baits really hard, sometimes it's good to have a mono leader as opposed to a fluoro leader, just because it'll take that shock a little bit better than fluorocarbon, because mono stretches. And a lot of times you won't end up pulling your knot out. This rod is so powerful on cast that if you whip it too hard with fluorocarbon, it will pull out a double Palomar knot. I've seen it happen. So for now, until I get used to this thing, I'm going to be fishing a mono leader. Overall, I think it's a really nice looking rod. I like the finish on it. It's got a really nice long butt end. Good for leveraging those heavy baits, really getting some distance. It has Fuji reel guides, so they're real nice and smooth. The line comes through there. And down at the bottom, the blank has a lot of backbone, and it goes up probably, let's see, where does it start? It starts to flex right about mid rod, then we get a little bit softer. And then at the tip, it has a surprising amount of flex. I was expecting this to be more of a pool cue, but I'd say, up towards the last 3 guides, it starts getting a lot of tip to it. So, I think this definitely can handle some heavy stuff. Usually weight ratings are more of a suggestion. A lot of times you can throw lighter or heavier depending on the bait. And that's one of the things that we're going to go over when I do my lure chucking demo, which we're going to do in just a minute. And I'm going to go over the baits and, just go over the weights for them. And we'll see how we do once we get it out there. Alright, so this is the first bait that I'm going to be throwing. This is a Savage Gear 7-inch rat, and this is rated at 1 ounce. So it's kind of a heavier bait. It's a glide bait. This is something I've thrown. I mean, we've all done this. If you don't have a heavy action rod, you've used a lighter action rod that really isn't rated. And while you're able to cast these things, you just don't have the confidence or the power to get them out a lot of the time. You're always on the verge of possibly breaking your line or your rod and losing these things. So one of the reasons I wanted a heavy action rod was that I could be able to throw this without being concerned about breaking my tip off or busting my line. So that's our first one. That's 1 ounce. Next thing I'm going to be throwing is a Jenko Fishing CD25, and this is 1.7 ounces. This is something that I'm going to be throwing on the quarry. I want to have bigger baits because there's some bigger fish in there. There's up to 10 pound fish in that particular spot. So I've been really thinking about fishing these heavier baits. The next thing I'm going to throw, depending on what we're looking like out there today, is the Whopper Plopper 130. And I caught one of my old PBs before I caught bigger, was on one of these. A lot of people, they won't throw this. They think it's too big. But I guarantee you, a 3 to 4 pound bass, they will take a 130. And this is rated at 1 3/4 ounce. I got away with throwing this on a medium action because it is fairly light, but you know, like I said with the other ones, you don't have that confidence that you're going to get it back. So let's see, next up we're going to do the Huddleston. Now this is the reason I bought this rod in the first place. That's your classic California Matt Allen Huddleston right there. This is a Huddleston 68. This is 2 ounces, so this is a little bit, this is a ½ ounce over my rod's power rating, but sometimes you can get away with a little heavier bait. We're going to try it and see what happens. This is the Huddleston 68 weedless, so it's a slow sinker compared to the other one. I forget what the other rating is. This is a slower rate of fall, is better for like ponds and stuff. If I had known at the time when I bought this I was going to be fishing like a huge rock car, I probably would have got the faster sinking one, but when I bought this it was for fishing my ponds, and you really don't want a fast sinker for a pond that's only 5 feet deep. So next thing I'm going to be throwing is the Flippin' the Bird. Because of the length of the rod and the power, I think it would be, and it's got a fairly soft tip, I think this would be fine to frog on. So I'm going to try my heaviest frog type bait, and this is the Flippin' the Bird I got a while back. And the fish seem to like it. It's got a nice soft body. It collapses real well. It's a little grungy. I got to clean this thing before I take it out. So next up we have the S-Waver 168. This is a glide bait. This is a slow sinking one. And to be honest with you, I haven't had a lot of luck with this. It looks really good in the water. It might be the color. I might have wanted to go with a more natural color, but I bought this back in Maryland for fishing really stained water. And if I had known at the time I was going to be moving here, I probably would have gone with a more natural color. But it looks really good in the water. This is 1 5/8 of an ounce. 1 5/8 ounce. And again, it's one of my heavier baits. So next up we have the Live Target Shad. And this is a ½ ounce. And now we have the Storm Wild Eye Suspending Swim Shad, and this is 1 ounce, although it feels a lot heavier. Maybe because it's got a buoyancy chamber, it just feels a lot bulkier than some of the other baits that are close to the same weight. Alright, so we're here out on the pond, and I feel like it's only a matter of time before I get run off by golfers. But first up we got the Savage Gear Rat. Let's see how that casts. That felt pretty good. Didn't load up the rod as much as I like, but definitely within the weight range for this rod. So that's a +1 for the Savage Gear Rat. Alright, so next up we got the Storm Wild Eye Suspending Swim Shad. And this feels a little heavy for this rod. You can see the tip bowing. So let's try this and see what happens. So that felt a little sketchy. It's definitely doable, but I do feel like that's really pushing it with this rod. That's about as hard as I want to cast with this rod. I think you would need to go up a power to really throw that bait with confidence if you're going to do something that crucial. This is the bait I've managed to get away with throwing on a medium power rod, but just like with that storm, it feels sketchy. It feels like it's just too heavy to really throw with any kind of confidence. So we're going to try this 130, which a lot of people use to fish for muskie, but they do work very, very well for largemouth bass. Now that felt good. That felt just about perfect for this rod. Didn't feel sketchy. Good cast on it. Didn't feel like I was going to lose the bait at any point or pull the knot. Didn't feel like the tip was going to get broke off or anything. So the Whopper Plopper 130 is definitely comfortable on this rod. So our next bait is going to be the Huddleston 6'8". It's got the 6-inch body with the 8-inch tail. I believe this is 2 ounces. You can already tell it's a little heavy for this rod. Now, even though it was heavier, it felt a little bit better than that storm bait. It might be because of the body profile and the weight distribution, but it felt all right. I probably wouldn't cast this as hard as I could, maybe about half power, but the rod seemed to handle it all right. This is probably, if there's a red zone for weight on this rod, this is at the bottom of that red zone, like right over the line of just being just this tad too much. You could probably get away with it. I think to really throw this bait with 100% confidence, you probably want an extra heavy, or maybe a Magnum, a heavy Magnum. Alright, so next up we have the live target shad. And feels like it would work pretty well for this rod. Again, no issues at all with the weight. Feels pretty good on the cast. Don't feel like I'm overloading the rod at all. So we're going to put this down as a plus for this rod. If you fish this particular bait, this rod will handle it just fine. Alright, so next up we have the S-Waver. Doesn't seem to be stressing the rod tip too much. Feels alright. It's a little janky, a little sketchy, but not too bad. I feel fairly confident throwing this. And again, I think weight distribution of the bait really affects that sort of sketchy feeling. Alright, so next up we got the Jenko Fishing deep diving crankbait. I think this goes down to about 25 feet. Feels a little janky. Feels a little sketchy. Again, definitely doable. Not optimum for this rod, but if you need a rod to throw something and this is all you got, I think this could handle it. Again, this is just on the outside of being what I would consider within the safe range. Probably more towards the middle of the red zone. So now we're going to move on to our last bait for testing out this rod. We're going to see if we can use it as a frog rod, if it has enough tip to load up and throw a frog. Alright, you got the flipping the bird on. And honestly, that felt pretty good. I think you can definitely use this as a frog rod, but the tip is a little heavy. So unless you're throwing some bigger frogs, I think this would have trouble with some of the smaller frogs. Definitely not getting the distance I normally would with a lighter action rod. And the long butt end kind of makes it kind of hard to walk it a little bit. Again, it's not made to be a frog rod, but in a pinch, you know, if you only want to take one rod, this would be adequate with a little work, a little extra effort on your part. So that's going to do it for the Ardent Denny Brauer Swimbait rod. And while all the baits were doable, a couple of them just felt really sketchy. I think you could get away with throwing them. I would just be careful. And I'll list the ones that I thought were a little sketchy. But it does seem to be dependent on the bait, because I felt a lot better throwing the Huddleston, which was 2 ounces, way over its weight rating, compared to the Storm, which is in the range to be thrown on this rod. And you know, it just doesn't really make sense. It's dependent on the bait and how it's weighted. So I hope that helps you guys. It's a good rod. I feel like it's a quality rod. I'm happy I picked it up. I got it for pretty cheap, so you know, even though it has trouble with some baits, I'm definitely not disappointed with it at all. It does not make a very good frog rod, mainly because the butt end is so long, it gets unwieldy. I think in a pinch you could definitely use this as a frog rod. It's a little long. I'd prefer it to be around 7.4 to be a frog rod. This is 7.6, so it's a little long, but mainly it's just the butt end is kind of a problem. It really gets in the way when you're trying to walk the frog and whatnot. So that's going to be my review of the rod, and I hope you guys found it informative and helpful, and I'll catch you guys next time. I'm going to be fishing that quarry soon, so hopefully I'll have a video for you about that. And keep fishing.